What's going on, everybody? This is George Khalife. It's episode 25 of Let's Grab Coffee. I'm here with my friend, the awesome entrepreneur, Mark Metry. Mark is the founder of Humans 2.0 podcast. If you guys haven't checked it out, we actually did a podcast together. It was a couple months ago now, which was really awesome. And Mark has been a phenomenal interviewer. And he's grown this podcast to one of the top 50 self-help podcasts on iTunes. So if you haven't checked it out, the first thing you should do after this is go to iTunes, subscribe to Mark, and make sure you follow this podcast. And he's had people like Neil Patel, David Meltzer, Jay Samit, I think, and so many other people. And it's phenomenal to see also the sort of wide range of interviewers he's had on the podcast as well, from athletes to entrepreneurs to business people. And so, whatever your kind of your subject or your topic that you're kind of interested in, Mark has it nailed down and he has it provided. So Mark is also the founder of a company called VU Dream, which is a marketing and advertising agency based in Boston that services the virtual and augmented reality space. Mark's big on that. If you haven't checked it out also on Instagram, he has a social channel called VU Dream. I honestly recommend it. It kind of keeps me up to date with all the news that's happening in that space. And he's just a guy that's passionate about podcast, self-development, as well as virtual reality. So Mark, thanks a lot for doing this, man.
Quite the intro, George. Thank you so much for having me on, and thank you everyone out there for listening.
Love it, dude. So look, a lot of people listening. Tell us about yourself. How'd you get started? Who's Mark?
Yeah, cool, dude. So I mean, if you want to take a top-down view, I was born in 1997. Always was a kid that had kind of entrepreneurial tendencies. Didn't really go full blown. At the age of 15, I ended up starting a business that really opened my eyes in terms of the internet, was very financially successful. Moved on from there, ended up starting a business called VU Dream. I got into virtual reality because I just became aware of all of its uses, from the medical field to, from this industry to this industry. I basically came to the realization that virtual reality, augmented reality is essentially going to disrupt every single industry in 10, 15 years, and even how we view content and engage with each other in general. So I was like, all right, I got to get into this like right now. So I just started with whatever I could do at the beginning. And originally it was a completely different business model, but eventually after a pretty solid marketing campaign through trial and error, and through getting millions of people on our website, CEO after CEO started reaching out to me saying, hey, we're in like this super niche VR space. How do you market to all these people? We ended up switching our business model to just be a growth agency for those companies, and it's been doing amazing ever since. In the process of that, I ended up starting this podcast called Humans 2.0, and it was born out of a few elements coming together, but overall it was just a lot of different issues in my life kind of arose at the same time, not just on the business level, but on the personal level, on the like literally on every single level. So I was just kind of like, all right, I got to bring out the big guns, and I clearly don't know what I'm doing. So why don't I create a platform that almost systematically enables me to learn from the world's greatest people? So that's what I started doing. It didn't start off so great. I had a lot of the fear of failure going. Took me almost like 2 months to put out one podcast. But ever since then, it's been on a roll, and that's what I do now.
Very cool, man. So let's talk a bit about the podcast, because I know that's obviously a big thing for you as well. And what I kind of want to ask about the podcast is a lot of my friends now, see the platforms that we have, and they say like, oh, I really want to get into this space. I just don't know I don't know where to start. I don't know, what should my topic be? I don't know what my value prop should be. So how did you go about figuring out, just how to actually create that infrastructure to which your Humans 2.0 podcast was built on?
Yeah, that's a good question. So I can tell you the story kind of behind it. So I guess the first seed of it was planted. I was having this conversation with a lot of my friends, and it was about the technological singularity. I don't know if you know what that is or not, but it's basically this theory coined by this guy named Ray Kurzweil. He's the head of engineering at Google. He's written a bunch of books. He's a genius guy. You should look into him. But basically, he makes the case that humans, through nanotechnology, artificial intelligence, are going to be able to transcend biology by the year 2045. So not that long. So I was talking to my friends about this, and they were telling me, Mark, there's no way this is possible. This is not going to happen. It's not, technologically possible. This is nobody's ever going to invent such a thing. And, those reasons to me were very intellectually lazy. It's one thing to disagree with it, but the reasons that they were giving me, they weren't satiating me. And through that process of technology and through that growth, I started thinking about it because a big concept of the podcast is technology and self-development, especially how technology is changing how we survive today. So I had that concept going, and the term humans 2.0 just like popped in my mind eventually after, a couple weeks of doing that. But really, when I started it, there was not like a set topic. It was just what I was interested. And at the beginning, you mentioned that I have a wide variety of topics, but I think they're all kind of saying the same thing. And that's just the kind of person I am. I'm very interested in different things. But once I had that development topic and that name going, I just started. I didn't really give too much to the graphics, the description, name, anything like that. That was all just kind of a step by step. And just like for background, when I first came up with the idea for it, I made like this trailer on YouTube in June of 2017. And I didn't upload a single podcast after that for 2 months. And, a lot of it was me trying to get different guests together. But a big part of it was just like I built like this thing in my head, like this name, Humans 2.0, that I was almost kind of anxious to proceed forward because I didn't want to screw it up. But after I got over that, everything was just super simple. Everything started connecting together, just how it usually is.
Yeah, and like every scenario, man. But I think that's something we all go through. Like I think I felt the exact same way, with my first episode. And I'm not sure if you kind of went through this, but in the beginning, when I started reaching out to people, even though I had a pretty big network, when I started telling people I wanted to do this podcast, very few actually wanted to be the first guest on the first episode of my show, just because they kind of didn't want to take that risk of how it might turn out. So they're like, look, have a couple under your belt, man. Come back, we'll do it. So just getting that first person, I think for me, I always say this, but Paul Nadeau has been like a blessing in disguise, man. Just to even want to do that and give me that chance to build a platform. I like the fact that you said it took you 2 months to kind of get over that hump. So what did what was that tipping point for you? I mean, you went through those 2 months. What was that clicking point where you said, you know what, I can't wait any longer. Like I just have to start putting this stuff out there.
Yeah, for sure. So I think what you said is really interesting. And, what I did, for example, is I reached out to the connects that I had in the virtual reality industry, the industry that I was already in. So that's how I got my first couple of guests. So that made it easier. But for me, what really made me do it is, George, for me, I'm either like a 0 or a 100 guy. I'm only on or off. I don't do things in the middle. And that's how I lived my entire life. And internally, what that's kind of built in for me is like this, not really a critic, but somebody that says, if you're not taking action, if you're just overthinking it, there's kind of like a timer, and it gives me like this timer, and it's like, okay, you're thinking about it. Now you actually have to do something about it. And for me, that tipping point came, I'm pretty sure it was when I saw one of my friends start another podcast. And then that kind of like motivated me to do it. And I was like, all right, I'm just going to do this thing. I already have a couple guests that are lined up, and I did it. But here's the thing. It wasn't clean after that either. I posted two in one day, like at the very end of August. I didn't post anything else for like another 2 weeks. It took me like another overall like 3 weeks to post like a couple more. It was just not very consistent whatsoever. But for me, what really broke the straw on the camel's back, so to speak, was at the beginning of the year, January 1st, 2018. I was like, man, I've already seen the opportunity from this podcast already. I would be stupid not to take it. And I just went all in, started posting 3-4 episodes a week. And that's where I really started to see things taking off.
What would you say has been the biggest, I guess, reward for you having done, and how many episodes has it been so far for you, Mark?
Published like
Oh,
97, but recorded maybe like 115.
okay. 115, 97. So out of those 97, like what has been really the most rewarding part of actually creating this thing?
Yeah, I mean, overall, like through the process of creating the podcast, I mean, I would say the biggest thing is, just like I said, like I'm one of those people. I love learning, and if I go a day without learning, I kind of feel sick. It doesn't work, and just the way that I've learned personally, the way I learn is through experiential auditory conversations, and the process of getting on a Hangouts, this is gonna seem weird, but the process of getting on a Hangouts call with like a New York Times bestselling author, somebody who like you read their book like 3 years ago and it like changed your life, and then like being somebody who doesn't necessarily, go out there in public speak, that's kind of like built in this other side of me that I didn't really know that was there. So I'd say it's fundamentally changed my life, and people talk to me about this all the time, like the benefits of podcasting, and the audience and like the brand, the reach, all that stuff is just the cherry on top. But the actual process of me doing it, I would totally do a podcast even if it was never recorded. Like I would 100% hands down do it. Overall, it's just like the wisdom that I'm learning from so many people, and it really, really motivates me.
That's crazy, man. And just, I guess the last question on the podcast stuff is, what then, having done almost 100 episodes published, what would you say have been your rules for success in creating a top 50 podcast?
Yeah. Research the other person. I see a lot of podcasters that they want to get like this specific name because it's going to like help their iTunes ranking and like, cross promotion. And sure, that is important. But ultimately what happens when you do that is you're just focusing in on the result and not the quality of the conversation. So, I'm sure you've heard a bunch of times. I listen to a bunch of podcasts. Some of them are really bad. Some of them are like, oh yeah, so how'd you do that? And what happened next? And it's very clear that they don't care. And I think a big part of that is they don't do the research on the person before. And I kind of learned this from Jordan Harbinger. He's like one of the top podcasters out there. And he researches his guests for 8 hours. And, I don't know if you could do it to that extent, but, if you can, more power to you. But it just enables you, it gives you the context for their own life. So when you're having that conversation, you're able to offer a much more fulfilling and engaging conversation that's not on other podcasts, which makes, your podcast more authentic. The other thing that I would say is, and this definitely depends on your ambition and what you want to happen, but for me, a big part was posting more than once a week. For me, my thought process was, I love podcasting. I want to be a top podcaster, but I'm not Tim Ferriss. I don't have that brand equity to establish it. I'm just coming out. I need to almost compensate for that. So to me, I think there's over 500,000 podcasts out there right now. To me, I think if you have the ambition for it, I think it's really important to be posting more than once a week. But then again, it's not necessary for sure. And I would say the last thing is, so many people just post their thing on iTunes, Stitcher Radio, and they just leave it alone. They're not leveraging LinkedIn. They're not leveraging writing a Medium article about it. They're not leveraging, Instagram or any of that stuff. But, what I found to be really beneficial is, and Neil Patel told me this. He says, if you just write an article on the podcast episode you did, it completely changes the game for it. It makes it a lot more searchable. And making whether it's like little audio memos or video clips promoting your podcast on different social networks, especially LinkedIn, because LinkedIn is super, super underrated. And I think, if anything, I've really built my podcast on the back of LinkedIn for sure and definitely. But I'd say those three are the big ones for me.
That's awesome, man. And I guess just one thing I wanted to also mention was for I guess the frequency, I definitely agree with you. I mean, just because, one model kind of works for one person, like say the Tim Ferriss example, if you compare Tim Ferriss versus Joe Rogan, they're extremely different podcasts, right? Or Joko Willenick, like the way they approach the podcast, or if you look at like Sam Harris, or if you look at even Jordan Peterson, right, recently, like they all have their different kind of ways to do it. And so even with research, right, I think like a great example is you and I, like when I was on your podcast first, learned a lot about you actually in retrospect. And then we stayed very closely connected, whether it's on LinkedIn or Instagram, tried to connect in Boston when I was there. So we kind of built that relationship and that friendship to now when we do the podcast. It's like I already know so much about you anyways, because we constantly follow each other on digital, and we see each other's content. So in my mind, it's so embedded there that when we get here, it's literally like I'm catching up with a friend, and I'm genuinely interested in like, yo, what's going on, man? I want to learn more about what you've been doing. So
Exactly.
I like that piece, man. So I love that. Definitely, I can't wait to see more of that content with your podcast. And it's interesting too, because you have the podcast and you have the startup on the side, which is VU Dream. What got you interested in the virtual space? When did that happen? Because it's a relatively new space, right? I know it's been there for a bit, but I think it started in the gaming industry. Now it's like across pretty much any sector, more on the training side and the business side. So just tell us about that.
Yeah, sure. I mean, I think it's a real interesting story, and I think you'll find it interesting. So, the way that I really started discovering VR is like I've always tried it out in like malls. I tried it like at the Microsoft store, put on the virtual reality headset. I thought it was pretty cool. Nothing too game changing, but I thought it was pretty cool. I'm in one of my college classes, and one of the assignments is to do a research project on a technology topic. So, out of nowhere, I just picked virtual reality, didn't even think about it. I ended up doing some research on it, and I came to the realization that, not even like 20 years in the future, like right now, it's being used to help veterans with PTSD. Right now, it's being used to help kids with autism, help people with schizophrenia, all these different sorts of uses that we don't necessarily have today. But it's such a new revolutionary computing platform that it enables anything you imagine to be possible. It enables that to be created in a real virtual space, which we've never had that before. So that concept alone is totally different. And the real way I started the business was, and this is going to be real interesting. Basically, I had all sorts of issues pop up in my life, and I was kind of changing myself into a human version 2.0, if you know what I mean. And starting a business was part of that. And for me, one night I was at this party, and I was just wasting my time, wasn't doing anything beneficial. I ended up having just the hunch to leave, just to start becoming something more. It was a very weird experience, but I basically ended up going to my room, pulling out a notebook paper, writing down a variety of different industries to my knowledge that I'm interested in. And I basically write down all these industries, and then after that I do kind of a cross analysis to say, okay, if I get into this industry right now, it wouldn't really work too much because it requires a lot of capital to start up, and I don't have much experience. Or this industry isn't mature enough, and it'll take 30 years to mature. Or this industry is too mature. By the time I get into it, I won't be the mature player that I am today. Eventually, I just did a cross analysis and came down to virtual and augmented reality. And once I had that, I was like, okay, what problem can I solve that's in this industry that I could work on right now? So there's the education part. Nobody really knows what VR and AR is online. So I started tackling that. Another thing was VR headsets. So what my company started doing was, at first we started just to sell VR headsets online, but we ended up doing a free headset promotion where anybody can just go on and get a free headset and pay for shipping. And then we also started working with schools to get different headsets shipped to their classroom because the education VR potential is crazy. So that's what we started doing. It's a very pragmatic thing. It was like, okay, month by month, what can we start implementing? What can we start doing? And that's what it transformed into. That answers your question.
Yeah, no, for sure. I love that story, man. And I kind of like your mindset towards doing that cross-sectional analysis, and it's kind of like a SWOT analysis or any other sort of business kind of plotting where you're looking at, what value prop do I have and where do I fit within what's out there in the market. And for you, I mean, because I think you've leveraged a lot of the marketing and advertising knowledge that you've had in the past. And I want to get to that because I know there was a company prior to VU, but did you feel like marketing was lacking in that space? And what did you feel like with what you can bring would differentiate yourself from what was already there at that time?
Yeah, that's a great question. So like I said, we started off selling VR headsets, and little did I know what we were really doing in process of marketing that on our website, trying to get people on, is we were really trying to market the concept of buying virtual reality for yourself, for your home.
Okay.
And the thing with VR is, if there's a huge range of different VR companies and what they do, but essentially is you can't just make like a Facebook ad for a virtual reality app or a game, because there's a funnel that you have to follow. And do these people have VR headsets? Yes or no? A lot of people don't. So the marketing for it is not just as straight as it is for some other companies. So we were really nailing that down in the process of that beginning phase. And through our marketing program, long story short, like on our website, for our niche, like we basically like rank within like the top 3 searches on Google for VR. Our website gets millions of people on that are specifically interested in VR. And when you have something like that in an industry where nobody really has it figured out at all, it can be pretty valuable. And that's exactly what we did. That just like you said, it's a brand new industry. It's still being formed. All of these marketing and advertising measures aren't necessarily in place yet. Nobody really knows where's the best place to, get an ROI on your advertising in the VR industry. So we kind of did that already. So we kind of nailed it down. And ever since we had that, I had CEOs calling us up. Like it wasn't even a thing that I had in my mind that I could sell as, like I didn't even have it in my mind. It was only until, oh, how are you guys doing this? Oh, well, do you think it's possible to, have it on our company and sell this VR product? And that's how it really came about.
You're raising a really good point though, Mark. And what's funny is I was actually having a discussion with someone over coffee yesterday, and they were trying to target CFOs. I'll make the connection here in a second, but they were trying to market and advertise their firm and their services and their products to CFOs of startups. The issue is, though, that the medium that they were using wasn't necessarily attracting that target audience. And I think in marketing that happens so often, right? Because like you want to use LinkedIn, you want to use Instagram, and you want to use all the social channels, and you think that all those social channels are right for the medium that you're trying to target. But you raised a really good point saying like, look, we understood very quickly what works and what doesn't in the VR and AR space. And then we kind of tailored the frequencies, we tailored the channels, the mediums to make it more effective. Otherwise, and you raised this even previously with your podcast, you said like, look, people will get on iTunes and think that's it, right? Or a podcast or Zencast, whatever. They'll just put it out there and just say, okay, now they'll find me and I'll get to the top 10, top 1 status, right? But what you've been doing even with your podcast, even with VU, is you're taking like this chunk of content, right? And then you're dicing it in so many different ways. And I see that even with the Instagram channel, like you've repurposed the channel now to make it about news and updates and trends so that people can kind of stay up to date. You're not pushing anything, but that value add that you're creating indirectly entices people to learn more about the VR and AR space and come to you for, whether it's help or support or using you as a sounding board, whatever it is. So
yeah, for sure. I can't tell you how many messages I get on my on View Dream's Instagram account that are just like from some like CEO, COO of some VR company that's like, yo, I heard you guys do blah 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 and blah blah blah. And it just leads to so many things. And like a lot of people before they step into that world, they don't understand that concept. But that's why the easiest thing is just to start, to just do it, trial and error, figure out what works, figure out what doesn't.
So let's kind of, I guess, take this back now. And So we talked about the podcast. I'm kind of reverse engineering this podcast. View Dream. Let's talk a bit about PPMC. Now, I don't have, to be honest, dude. I'm not a techie. Like I'm marketing sales guy, and I'm reading this. I'm like number one. I can't even say Pixelman Minecraft server, but I'm reading this and I'm like 10 million users. 10,000 registered premium members. Like it's kind of interesting to see. And you had a staff of 40 people. Like, just tell us about this story. What was this, and how did you create it? And I'm assuming this was at a very young age, because
15.
Jesus. Okay. So what was this, dude? Explain this to me.
Yeah, sure. So like the preface to this is ages like 11 to 15. I was really into video games, and I started posting them on the internet. I started posting them on YouTube, and that was at the time where like there weren't people with like millions and millions. There were a few, but it wasn't that many. I made some money on it, but basically there's this game called Minecraft. And I always used to think of it as like, oh, dude, that's just like a kid's game. It's like some weird Lego forest thing. I'm never gonna play that. One of my friends hops into it. He basically gets me to come on. We're playing there. And we end up like joining a couple multiplayer servers, like where you can play online with your friends, like multiple people in one game.
Okay.
And while I'm playing there, like they're all lagging, they all suck. There's like 600 people on the server, and it's horrible. So I'm just thinking in my mind, like in my young naive mind, like, dude, I could totally do a better version of this. And I remember very quick, like in that same day, go on Google. I start Googling a bunch of things. How do I start a Minecraft server? How do I download this? And then I end up basically hosting or buying a server slot from this hosting company in New York for like $10 a month. And anything else I didn't know how, I ended up hiring this freelancer from India that helped me install like the Java plugins, helped me set them up, taught me how to do it. It wasn't anything too complex, but I just didn't know how to do it. So I spent like $30 on him. And I get on this server. I literally have no idea. Like I'm just Googling my way, like anything. How do I install this? Or it's giving me this error code. What does this mean? How do I fix it? Within like a couple weeks, I had people joining the server, and to keep the story short, literally just like a mini community starts to form, and within that mini community, people start like naturally adopting roles. It was kind of like a self-forming organism. Like in the server, there's I don't know if you ever played Pokemon before, but there's different gym leaders. Like there's like these leaders you need to beat. So people just start volunteering for that. And like as I'm seeing this whole thing grow, I'm doing tweaks to the website. I'm adding a voting feature where people can go on the top Minecraft server website and vote for us, and they'll get a reward in the game. So I'm adding all these things. Next thing you know, so I started this in November 13th of 2013. And within Thanksgiving time, so just a week or two, we had an online store. People could buy microtransactions. People can buy virtual objects in the game. Like if they want to buy like a cool Pokeball, they want to buy like a cool backpack, they can spend real money and get it in the game.
Mm-hmm.
And next thing you know, Thanksgiving weekend comes. We end up making like $300 on that weekend. And I'm thinking like, wow, we just made $300. And I never really made money online. I made like some little things. I did like some freelancing, did some YouTube stuff, and then at the end of that month, it made like over $1,000. And like, that's when my brain really started thinking, I'm like, wait, what is this? But I just don't think about it. I keep working on the website. I start figuring things out. Just typical, you see this happen, you optimize it, you tweak it. Looking back at it now, a lot of the marketing things that I was doing was like email, community, like direct message marketing that I didn't even know what the word marketing meant. Next thing you know, I'm 16 years old. It's one of the top Minecraft servers in the world. There's thousands of people joining every day. It's making a crazy amount of money. People are, messaging me back and forth. And like, I end up going to like different conferences when I'm 18 and 19, and people like recognize me. as like the kid who started that server, because like it wasn't me, but like the server itself was super popular.
Yeah.
I ended up having a staff team of 40 people. Really just crazy things. But that's really how I got my my start of
So,
things. I just kind of stumbled into it. Yeah.
but what ended up happening to it? Did you just like sell it or
Dude,
what?
it's still up right now, man. Like I own it and I have other people running it, but I just don't I don't like manage it or anything. I just have other people doing it.
That's crazy, man.
Yeah.
Yeah. So you monetize mostly from the store, or like is there other?
Yeah, so it's completely free to join, to come on. You can play as much as you want. There's no limits on the game or anything, but if you just want anything extra, you can pay for it.
Hmm, that's very,
Yeah.
very cool, man. I was
Yeah.
laughing like when you're telling the story, just in terms of like like outsourcing, help from India, paying a person in New York to host this, or like I'm like you're like 13, 14. How the fuck were you doing this? It's
Dude, I just knew how to Google things, man.
That's crazy. I'm gonna use that Instagram caption. I just know how to Google things.
That's really it, man. And like just like as a quick like arbitrage to that, like on the podcast that I have and talking to all the guests, like I can't tell you how many of them, maybe not necessarily like dumbfoundedly stumble into it like I did, but so many of them just
Just yeah.
They Google their way through, they trial and error their way through, they have no idea what they're doing until you kind of like look back and say, oh wow, that was that was the thing that was happening, you know.
I had the same experience even when I started anything, to be honest. I mean, when I started my podcast, it was the same thing. When I started my blog, I remember, man, it was like 9 p.m. or something on a Thursday. And I go to Google, I'm like, how do you create a website, like a blog? And the first thing that came up was WordPress. So I click on it, I'm like, oh, this is cool, like templates, because I didn't know how to build a website from scratch. So I'm like, I definitely need a template. And I just pop it open. It looked like crap in the beginning. And I just kind of started tweaking it from there and just started writing. And then LinkedIn has been another great platform for that as well. If you don't actually want to have a separate blog site, or Medium is super easy. But to your point, man, like a lot of what we do is in the beginning, I mean, that's why that notion, like fake it till you make it, it has such a negative connotation, but everybody fakes it till they make it. Like at some point in time, you can't have all the answers. So there's always this road of like ambiguity that you're traveling on. And as you travel on it, you're trying to find answers and such, like whether it's talking to people or figuring out yourself. But in that period, you're going to have to go through it. And it's a lot of like trial and error, finding, searching, being curious. And
Yeah, that's why the most important thing is just to keep moving forward and just keep trying. You know, I'm sure you see all the time, like people are on like LinkedIn and people are on this, like, dude, how do I start doing this? You just start, you just do it. Don't overthink it, because if you overthink it, you'll be somebody like me, 2 months before they even have a podcast episode.
right.
That's why you just got to put one foot in front of the other.
What would you say you've learned from having hosted so many of these guests, I should call them, or friends on the podcast? Because you've had very different discussions, and as you said, like you were trying to find answers for your own challenges, maybe, right? Spiritual, health, business related. So what are some key lessons that have stuck with you from some of the podcasts that you've done?
Yeah. So yeah, this is a very hard question, because it's just
There's so many.
so many people. But I'll tell you some things, like tell you some things I haven't mentioned before, because I get this question a lot. I had this guy on episode 57, Ira Israel, and it was a very meta conversation about obsolete systems in the 21st century, like governments and institutions. And one thing that he said to me that was really interesting is he had a car accident. Half his face was like gone, chopped off, and he went around for 20 years telling everybody, oh yeah, I was in a car accident where I almost died and half my face almost got chopped off. And eventually he says that for 20 years, and then he gets down to this guy, and he tells him, and he's like, no, it didn't. And he's like, okay, I was in a car accident, I almost died. And he's like, no, that didn't happen. And he's like, you were in a car accident, everything else you added. And it kind of gave me the reflection of my own life to see, okay, is the story that I'm telling about myself to myself, is it accurate? Is it really accurate? Or is my ego just trying to add on to all these different things so I can kind of latch onto it with my identity to have people feel sorry for me or to make myself feel better about it. That to me was really peculiar.
Mm.
One guy on who I had, Jay Henricks. He's a New York Times bestselling author. He wrote the book Thank You for Arguing. This is very recent. He taught me a very interesting tip, and he said before you get on a video chat, before you get on to like an interview or anything like that, this is going to sound really weird, but I started thinking about it, and it's make the intention before you come on the video chat that you love the other person and that you love their audience. And that to me, it sounds really weird, but it's extremely powerful. Yeah, for sure. Another one, I'll say like the last one. This guy named David Meltzer.
Yeah.
He's a genius dude. He was the CEO of the world's first smartphone. He runs one of the top sports marketing agencies, and he shared with me the story of the bamboo tree.
Oh yeah.
And it's that one. Yeah, I think I posted that one on my Instagram, but it's so powerful, and it's basically for the first 4 or 5 years of the bamboo tree, it grows and it's only like 2-3 inches.
Mm-hmm.
But underneath the soil, underground, it's creating this whole ravenous, deep-seated foundation root system that's going to really go in the ground. But if you're looking at that bamboo tree for like the first 4 or 5 years, you're like, this thing isn't even growing. This thing isn't even moving. And he pretty much just it was an analogy to young entrepreneurs or people that are just starting in the game, and they're like, oh, where are my results? Where are my results? You got to spend those first 4 or 5 years really figuring out who you are as a person, really going introspective inside. And then once you have that, you'll be able to have the context and the value to be able to relate to others and create that authenticity that's going to actually propel you. Because after those 4 or 5 years, the bamboo tree fires up, it roots up at 80 feet tall.
Yeah.
And
what's funny, dude, is I used that in my interview for
nice.
when I was applying for the Toronto Stock Exchange, and it's such a phenomenal story, man. And I like actually how you positioned it on the entrepreneur side. There's so many ways actually you can look at it. Now that you're hearing you say the story now, I was thinking about it in like different angles actually. So that was cool.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's I think it can be related to a lot of things in life. A lot of things are like that, and that was just one lesson. But overall, the biggest thing that I've learned from the podcast is that you don't want to fool yourself or anything, but success really is all about perspective. And just by doing the podcast, what I've learned, George, is that by talking to like all these people that I have in my head as idols, like David Meltzer, Neil Patel, like people that I've been learning from for years online, having them come on the podcast and just having like a conversation with them before it starts, I came to the realization that they're just normal people. Yeah. They're like, they have their own fears, they have their own insecurities. And before at least me, I didn't really know that. I just thought like in my head, these are just perfect people.
They're unreachable. Yeah.
Exactly. That's been a huge thing for me.
That's crazy. And I think by doing that metaphorically, because they're attainable to have on the podcast, it kind of makes it seem that well, in a good way, or makes it actually a reality that the goals that you have in mind are also attainable.
Absolutely, 100%.
That's a very cool metaphor, man. I like that. And so, look, I asked this question to a lot of my guests, and I always like to end it in this way because you've shared so many great things, man. And I love those 3 different pieces, by the way. And it's even just nice to see you like really kind of retain that information. Like it shows how much you care about your podcast and about your guests. So you're applying that, by the way, that rule that someone told you, you're applying that well, man. You actually care about them and their guests. What's one thing for someone listening right now who's say in their early mid-20s, what's that one piece of advice that you'd give them that you've kind of picked up along the way?
Yeah. Find your North Star, find your highest truth, and take your best aim at it. In every 24 hours that you get, that's kind of the mechanism that you have. And And almost, what I want to say is, find your North Star, find your highest aim in life, whatever that is. That could be, and you got to really drill deep down. Don't just say I want to be an entrepreneur. Don't just say I want to have a podcast. Drill deep down, figure out what's really important to you. Take your best shot at it in whatever way, because when you understand that, you really can't fail. Mistakes are just the stepping stones up to there. And when you're aiming at your highest truth, everything should seem you should seem like you're living an adventure. Really. Let me reverse that. Think back to your life. Think of a time where, like, you literally could not wait to get up in the morning. It could be like the day of vacation. It could be the day where you're about to go to the beach with all your friends. Find that peak moment, and then figure out, what highest truth am I going to aim to continuously get that and live a real hero's journey. I know that was kind of weird and elongated, but I think people know what I'm talking about.
100%, man. 100%. So basically, be the hero in your story. Not just, your life is the story, and you're the main character. So, for anyone listening, even, and I just add to that because I think that's a great kind of package that you put together, Mark, is, in every movie, there's always like those ups and downs too. And if you're in that down right now too, and if you face challenges, be that person that, turns things around, right? Just be that person that, no matter how fucking low you are right now, how deep in the trenches, that can withstand those challenges and those hurdles, pick things back up, get back up, even with those scars, bruises, and just keep going. And then, and then at least you can look back and say, look, I tried. And every measure of I tried is much better than I wish I did. So.
Yeah. If there's that quote, it says, if you aim for that, your highest star, and you miss, you'll still end up amongst the stars. So 100%, man.
Love it, dude. Well, Mark, thanks very much, man. I really appreciate the talk. It was good to finally, I know this is long overdue. So I was happy to have you on the podcast as well, man. And I'm sure a lot of people listening learn a lot from your story. And honestly, there's some things in there I didn't know myself. And just kind of hearing you talk about it from your perspective has been really cool. So thank you.
Awesome. George, thank you so much for having me on, and thank you so much for listening. If I can leave a request, everyone out there, go to George's page, go to George's website, leave him a review. This guy works really hard, and he appreciates it, and I would appreciate it.
Thank you, my man. Mark Metry, episode 25. Let's grab coffee now in the books. Thanks, brother.
Awesome.